Top 50 Public Policy Analyst Interview Questions and Answers. Welcome to today's video, where we dive deep into the top 50 Public Policy Analyst Interview Questions and Answers. Whether you're preparing for a government role, a nonprofit position, or a corporate policy team, these questions will give you clear insight into what hiring managers are looking for. Public policy is all about research, analysis, strategy development, and real-world impact. So expect questions that test your critical thinking and communication skills. Let's jump in and build your confidence for your next interview. 1. Can you explain the role of a public policy analyst? A public policy analyst researches social, economic, and political issues to help decision-makers craft effective policies. The role involves collecting data, evaluating existing programs, forecasting outcomes, and presenting recommendations through reports or presentations. Analysts also monitor legislative trends, stakeholder opinions, and potential impacts on communities. Their work supports evidence-based decision-making and ensures policies are feasible, equitable, and aligned with organizational goals. In essence, they bridge the gap between research, governance, and public needs. 2. Why did you choose a career in public policy? I chose public policy because it combines research, strategic thinking, and public service. I've always been motivated by roles that create measurable impact and improve societal outcomes. Public policy allows me to contribute to solutions that address complex issues like healthcare, education, economic stability, and environmental sustainability. I enjoy analyzing data, understanding diverse perspectives, and turning insights into actionable recommendations. It's a field that challenges me intellectually and aligns with my commitment to meaningful, long-term change. 3. What skills make you a strong public policy analyst? I possess strong analytical thinking, excellent research abilities, and a solid understanding of policy development processes. I'm experienced with qualitative and quantitative methods, data interpretation, and producing clear, actionable reports. My communication skills help me translate technical information for diverse audiences. I'm detail-oriented, adaptable, and comfortable managing multiple projects simultaneously. In addition, I understand stakeholder engagement, legislative structures, and program evaluation. These skills help me create well-informed, evidence-based recommendations that support impactful and sustainable policy outcomes. 4. How do you conduct a policy analysis from start to finish? I begin by defining the policy problem and its context. Next, I gather data through research, stakeholder input, and case studies. I develop evaluation criteria, such as feasibility, cost, equity, and effectiveness. I then outline possible policy alternatives and analyze their impacts based on the criteria. After comparing options, I prepare a recommendation supported by evidence. Finally, I communicate findings through clear reports or presentations and monitor implementation outcomes to refine future analyses. 5. What research methods do you use most often? I use both qualitative and quantitative research methods, depending on the policy question. Quantitatively, I rely on statistical analysis, surveys, and data sets to identify trends and measure outcomes. Qualitatively, I use interviews, focus groups, case studies, and literature reviews to gather detailed insights and stakeholder perspectives. Combining both approaches ensures comprehensive analysis and avoids blind spots. I also stay updated on new methodologies, such as predictive modeling and policy simulations, to enhance accuracy and relevance. 6. How do you stay updated on public policy trends? I regularly read policy journals, government publications, and think tank reports. I also follow reputable news outlets, attend conferences, and engage with professional networks to hear diverse perspectives. Subscribing to newsletters from organizations such as Brookings, RAND, OECD, or local policy institutes helps me track emerging issues. I participate in webinars, training sessions, and online forums to deepen my expertise. Staying informed ensures my recommendations are timely, evidence-based, and aligned with current policy developments. 7. Describe a policy project you're most proud of. I once led a project evaluating access to healthcare services for underserved rural communities. I conducted extensive data analysis, interviewed stakeholders, and identified barriers such as transportation cost and provider shortages. Using this information, I proposed feasible policy interventions, including mobile clinics, telemedicine expansion, and targeted subsidies. My recommendations were adopted and contributed to increased healthcare utilization in those areas. The project was meaningful because it directly improved equity and access for vulnerable populations. 8. What steps do you take to ensure data accuracy? I begin by validating data sources to confirm reliability and credibility. I cross-check information with multiple datasets, use standardized methods, and apply quality control checks. I ensure consistency through proper coding, documentation, and clear methodologies. When necessary, I consult experts or original data providers to clarify discrepancies. I also use software tools to detect anomalies or missing values. Maintaining accuracy is crucial because it strengthens the credibility of my analysis and supports sound policy recommendations. 9. How do you handle conflicting data or research findings? When data conflicts, I start by examining the sources for methodological differences, biases, or sample limitations. I compare assumptions, timeframes, and analytical approaches to understand inconsistencies. If needed, I seek additional data or conduct supplemental research to fill gaps. I then present findings transparently, highlighting limitations and explaining the rationale behind the conclusions I make. Instead of forcing alignment, I use the conflict to strengthen analysis and provide balanced, evidence-based recommendations. 10. How do you present complex research to non-technical stakeholders? I prioritize clarity by using simple language, structured explanations, and real-world examples. I break down key insights into digestible sections and highlight the implications most relevant to stakeholders. Visual aids like charts, graphs, and infographics help simplify complex data. I also tailor my communication style, depending on the audience's background and decision-making needs. The goal is to ensure they understand essential points quickly without oversimplifying important nuances. 11. What tools or software do you use for analysis? I commonly use analytical tools such as Excel, SPSS, R, and Python for data analysis and visualization. For qualitative research, I use NVivo or other coding software. I rely on Tableau or Power BI to create clear, interactive dashboards. For project management and documentation, I use tools like Trello, Notion, or SharePoint. These tools help organize information, enhance accuracy, and present insights effectively, allowing me to work more efficiently and provide robust policy recommendations. 12. How do you manage tight deadlines and policy work? I prioritize tasks based on urgency, complexity, and dependencies. I break down large projects into manageable milestones and allocate time responsibly. Clear communication with team members helps prevent delays, and I use project management tools to track progress. If challenges arise, I escalate issues early and collaborate on solutions. I remain flexible and focused, adjusting workloads as needed. Maintaining structure and discipline helps me consistently meet deadlines without compromising quality. 13. How do you evaluate whether a policy is effective? Evaluating effectiveness involves measuring outcomes against a policy's original objectives. I collect both quantitative and qualitative data to assess changes, such as behavioral shifts, financial impacts, or social benefits. I also examine implementation fidelity and gather feedback from affected groups. Comparing results with benchmarks or similar policies helps identify strengths and weaknesses. I then compile findings into a comprehensive evaluation that informs whether the policy needs modification, continuation, or replacement. 14. What is your approach to stakeholder analysis? I begin by identifying stakeholders affected by or influential to the policy issue. I assess their interests, power, influence, and potential reactions. Mapping these factors helps me anticipate support, resistance, and collaboration opportunities. I engage stakeholders through interviews, consultations, or workshops to gather input and build relationships. Understanding their perspectives ensures my analysis is realistic, inclusive, and aligned with the social and political context. Effective stakeholder engagement often leads to more implementable policies. 15. How do you build consensus among stakeholders? I focus on transparent communication, active listening, and empathy. I identify shared goals and highlight how proposed solutions address mutual interests. When disagreement arises, I encourage constructive dialogue. clarify misunderstandings, and explore compromises grounded in evidence. Facilitating collaboration and showing respect for each perspective helps build trust. My goal is to create a balanced, inclusive policy recommendation that stakeholders can support even if it requires adjustments. 16. Describe a time you dealt with a difficult stakeholder. I once worked with a stakeholder who resisted policy changes due to concerns about increased costs. Instead of challenging their position, I scheduled a one-on-one discussion to understand their underlying issues. I presented data showing long-term savings, risk mitigation, and community benefits. I also provided alternative solutions addressing their budget constraints. By showing respect and offering flexibility, I gained their support and moved the project forward smoothly. 17. How do you balance efficiency with equity in policy design? I assess the benefits and drawbacks of each policy option from both an efficiency and equity standpoint. Efficiency focuses on maximizing impact with minimal resources, while equity ensures fairness across diverse groups. I use distributional analysis to understand how different populations are affected. When trade-offs arise, I recommend balanced solutions that achieve reasonable efficiency without compromising fairness. Transparent communication about these trade-offs helps decision-makers choose policies aligned with organizational values and public expectations. 18. What is cost-benefit analysis and how do you use it? Cost-benefit analysis compares the expected cost of a policy with its anticipated benefits to determine net value. I quantify costs such as funding, administrative burden, and risks. Then I estimate benefits like improved health outcomes, economic growth, or environmental protection. When quantification isn't possible, I use qualitative assessments to capture additional value. The goal is to provide decision-makers with a clear picture of a policy's overall impact and viability. 19. How do you handle politically sensitive policy topics? I remain neutral and evidence-based, focusing on facts rather than opinions. I acknowledge political considerations while maintaining professional integrity. My analysis carefully separates data from interpretation and clarifies assumptions. I also anticipate stakeholder reactions and propose communication strategies to minimize conflict. When dealing with sensitive topics, my priority is to provide balanced, objective insights while supporting informed and responsible decision-making. 20. What is the difference between a policy and a procedure? A policy outlines overarching principles and goals that guide decision-making, while a procedure describes the detailed steps required to implement those policies. Policies define the what and why, whereas procedures focus on the how, when, and who. Both are essential for effective governance. Understanding this difference helps ensure that policy recommendations are strategic, while leaving operational specifics to the appropriate teams responsible for implementation. 21. How do you prioritize issues in policy analysis? I prioritize issues based on urgency, impact, feasibility, and alignment with organizational objectives. I evaluate the severity of the problem, the number of people affected, potential risks, and available resources. I also consider political climate, stakeholder priorities, and legal requirements. Using a structured framework helps me ensure that the most pressing and impactful issues receive attention first. This approach strengthens strategic planning and ensures effective use of time and resources. 22. How do you approach analyzing legislation? I start by reviewing the text thoroughly to understand its intent, legal implications, and scope. I assess how the legislation interacts with existing laws and potential enforcement challenges. I analyze economic, social, and administrative impacts and consult experts when necessary. I also evaluate implementation feasibility and unintended consequences. My goal is to present a comprehensive, balanced assessment that helps decision-makers anticipate outcomes and make informed choices. 23. What is your experience with program evaluation? I have conducted program evaluations using mixed method approaches. I assess program goals, performance indicators, implementation quality, and outcomes. I collect data through surveys, interviews, and administrative records. Then I compare results to benchmarks or control groups to measure effectiveness. I also identify strengths, weaknesses, and areas for improvement. My evaluations provide actionable insights that help organizations refine strategies, allocate resources effectively, and enhance long-term impact. 24. How do you ensure your analysis remains unbiased? I rely on credible sources, standardized methodologies, and transparent documentation. I clearly outline assumptions and acknowledge limitations to avoid misleading interpretations. I intentionally seek diverse perspectives to avoid confirmation bias. Peer reviews and stakeholder feedback help validate findings. My goal is to remain objective, evidence-based, and fair, ensuring decision-makers receive accurate and balanced insights regardless of personal or political viewpoints. 25. How do you incorporate ethics into policy analysis? Ethics guide both the process and the outcomes of policy analysis. I assess how policies affect vulnerable populations, privacy, fairness, and rights. I ensure transparency in data usage, avoid conflict of interest, and present both benefits and risks honestly. I consider long-term impacts and promote solutions that uphold dignity and justice. Ethical considerations are essential to ensuring policies not only solve problems, but do so responsibly. 26. Describe a time you used data to influence a decision. In a project assessing youth unemployment, I analyzed labor market data and discovered significant skill mismatches. I presented findings through compelling visualizations and recommended targeted training programs. The evidence persuaded decision-makers to reallocate funding toward vocational initiatives, which later showed strong participation rates and improved employment outcomes. This experience reinforced how well-structured data can drive meaningful policy adjustments. 27. How do you communicate risk in policy recommendations? I communicate risk by outlining potential consequences, uncertainties, and likelihoods. I categorize risks as financial, social, political, or operational and explain how they may affect outcomes. Using clear visual scenarios and cost-impact models helps stakeholders understand trade-offs. I provide mitigation strategies and highlight which risks are unavoidable versus manageable. Transparent risk communication ensures informed decision-making and builds trust. 28. How do you analyze long-term policy impacts? I use forecasting tools, trend analysis, and scenario modeling to predict long-term outcomes. I consider demographic shifts, economic patterns, technological changes, and environmental factors. I examine best and worst-case outcomes and analyze how different stakeholders may be affected over time. This forward-looking approach helps ensure that policies remain relevant, sustainable, and adaptable to future challenges. Long-term analysis prevents short-sighted decisions and promotes lasting impact. 29. How do you gather stakeholder feedback? I use interviews, focus groups, surveys, town halls, and public consultations to collect feedback. I tailor methods based on the audience, formal communities, experts, or affected populations. I encourage open dialogue and ensure confidentiality when necessary. Analyzing this input helps refine policy recommendations to be more realistic and inclusive. Stakeholder feedback is essential because it reflects real-world challenges and enhances policy legitimacy. 30. How do you handle incomplete or missing data? I assess the extent of missing information and determine whether patterns are random or systematic. I use estimation techniques, proxy variables, or supplemental data sources when appropriate. I also document limitations and analyze how missing data might affect conclusions. If crucial gaps remain, I recommend further research or advise caution in interpretation. Transparency ensures credibility and helps decision-makers understand the reliability of findings. 31. What frameworks do you use in policy analysis? I use frameworks such as the policy cycle, SWOT, PESTLE analysis, logic models, and cost-benefit analysis. These tools help structure complex issues, identify key variables, and evaluate alternatives systematically. Frameworks also ensure analytical consistency and clarity across different projects. Using well-established methodology strengthens the validity of recommendations and enhances communication with decision-makers who expect structured, evidence-based approaches. 32. How do you ensure a policy addresses diverse population needs? I conduct equity assessments and disaggregate data by demographics, such as age, gender, income, and geography. I engage diverse stakeholders to understand unique challenges and avoid one-size-fits-all solutions. I evaluate whether policies create unintended disparities and propose adjustments that promote fairness. Inclusive analysis ensures all groups are considered and supported, increasing policy success and legitimacy. 33. What is your experience with budgeting and fiscal analysis? I evaluate program costs, funding sources, and financial impacts using quantitative models. I compare projected expenses with expected benefits and identify potential savings or overruns. I assess budget alignment with policy goals and historical spending patterns. Fiscal analysis helps ensure recommendations are sustainable, affordable, and realistic. Communicating financial constraints clearly allows decision-makers to plan responsibly. 34. How do you approach cross-agency collaboration? I prioritize communication, share goals, and coordinated planning. I identify each agency's strengths and constraints and establish clear roles. Regular meetings, joint data sharing processes, and standardized reporting formats help maintain alignment. Collaboration ensures policy solutions are comprehensive and avoid duplication of efforts. Building strong relationships across agencies enhances efficiency and impact. 35. How do you adapt to changing political environments? I stay adaptable by remaining informed about political priorities, leadership changes, and shifting public expectations. I reassess policy options to ensure alignment with new contexts while maintaining analytical integrity. By focusing on evidence, flexibility, and strong communication, I can adjust recommendations without compromising quality. Adapting effectively helps keep policy work relevant and influential. 36. How do you manage confidential information? I follow strict privacy protocols and legal guidelines to protect sensitive data. I limit access to authorized personnel and store information securely. When presenting findings, I anonymize personal identifiers and disclose only what is necessary. Maintaining confidentiality builds trust with stakeholders and ensures compliance with ethical and legal standards. 37. What is your process for writing policy briefs? I begin by clarifying the purpose and audience. I provide context, summarize the problem, analyze data, and present evidence-based recommendations concisely. I use clear language, structured sections, and supporting visuals. Policy briefs must be actionable, readable, and persuasive. I revise thoroughly to ensure accuracy and alignment with organizational objectives. 38. How do you handle large datasets? I use tools like Excel, R, or Python to clean, organize, and analyze data. I validate data quality, check for anomalies, and create visualizations for easier interpretation. Breaking data into manageable segments and using automated processes improves efficiency and accuracy. Working systematically helps transform large datasets into meaningful insights. 39. How do you identify policy alternatives? I conduct comparative research, examine best practices, review historical outcomes, and consult experts. I also consider stakeholder suggestions, legal constraints, and resource availability. By brainstorming multiple approaches and evaluating their feasibility, equity, and effectiveness, I develop a comprehensive set of alternatives. A strong options analysis strengthens overall recommendations. 40. How do you address unintended consequences in policy design? I analyze potential risks using scenario planning, impact assessments, and stakeholder input. I examine how different groups may be affected and identify vulnerabilities. I propose mitigation strategies and recommend monitoring systems to detect issues early. Acknowledging possible unintended consequences ensures more resilient and thoughtful policymaking. 41. How do you incorporate behavioral insights into policy analysis? I study how human behavior influences policy outcomes and use behavioral economics principles to guide recommendations. I analyze decision-making patterns, incentives, nudges, and barriers. Integrating behavioral insights can significantly improve policy effectiveness by aligning interventions with how people actually behave rather than how we expect them to behave theoretically. 42. How do you address policy implementation challenges? I identify potential barriers, such as limited resources, unclear roles, or low stakeholder support. I develop strategies like phase rollouts, training programs, and communication plans. I also propose monitoring tools to track progress and adjust as needed. Addressing implementation challenges early increases the likelihood of policy success. 43. What is your experience with public consultations? I've organized public forums, stakeholder workshops, online surveys, and community dialogues. I ensure diverse participation, clear communication, and respectful discussions. Public consultations provide valuable insights, help build trust, and strengthen policy legitimacy. I analyze feedback to identify themes and incorporate findings into final recommendations. 44. How do you manage competing priorities in policy work? I evaluate urgency, impact, and strategic alignment to determine priority levels. I communicate transparently with supervisors about timelines and constraints. Breaking tasks into smaller components helps manage workloads efficiently. I stay organized and flexible to accommodate shifting priorities while maintaining quality. 45. How do you define a successful policy? A successful policy achieves its intended outcomes, adheres to ethical standards, remains cost-effective, and is widely accepted by stakeholders. It should address the root problem, demonstrate measurable impact, and be sustainable over time. Effective implementation, public support, and adaptability also contribute to long-term success. 46. Describe a challenging policy issue you analyzed. I analyzed a controversial housing policy aimed at increasing urban density. Stakeholders had conflicting interests, including affordability, zoning restrictions, and community resistance. I conducted extensive research, evaluated environmental impacts, and facilitated stakeholder consultations. My recommendations balanced economic growth with community needs and environmental sustainability. It was challenging but highly rewarding. 47. How do you ensure transparency in your analysis? I clearly document methods, data sources, assumptions, and limitations. I provide multiple options with unbiased evaluation and avoid hiding uncertainties. Transparent communication helps stakeholders trust my recommendations and encourages informed decision-making. Transparency is essential for accountability and credibility in public policy. 48. What motivates your work in public policy analysis? I'm motivated by the opportunity to contribute to meaningful, evidence-based solutions that improve society. I enjoy research, critical thinking, and collaboration. Seeing policy recommendations lead to real-world improvements is deeply fulfilling. Public policy is dynamic and impactful, which keeps me energized and committed to continuous learning. 49. How you handle feedback or criticism of your analysis. I view feedback as essential for professional growth and stronger outcomes. I listen carefully, ask clarifying questions, and assess whether revisions are needed. I differentiate between constructive input and subjective preference. By approaching criticism with openness and professionalism, I strengthen my work and build trust with colleagues. 50. Why should we hire you as our public policy analyst? You should hire me because I bring strong analytical skills, a deep understanding of policy processes, and a commitment to evidence-based decision-making. My experience with research, stakeholder engagement, and program evaluation ensures I can deliver high-quality insights. I work efficiently, communicate clearly, and adapt quickly to complex environments. I'm passionate about creating meaningful, sustainable solutions and will contribute value from day one. Thank you for watching this comprehensive guide to the top 50 public policy analyst interview questions and answers. Preparing for a policy role requires strong analytical thinking, communication skills, and a solid understanding of how public systems operate. Use this video to strengthen your confidence and refine your responses before your next interview. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more professional interview preparation content. Best of luck in your policy career journey.